Well, thank you. Good. So I just want to welcome everyone and tell you how I met Leslie. And this was last December. A friend of mine asked what I was doing, and I was interviewing world experts for the Inflammation Healthspan. And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "Those are the people that are dealing with spermidine." And I said, "Sperma what?" I mean, I really didn't know. And I met Leslie, and Leslie is just a wonderful, besides being a wonderful human being, extremely intelligent and passion to carry this message out to the world on the incredible science behind something that I have never heard talked about in functional medicine circles. Now, I've been on faculty of the Institute for Functional Medicine for 12 years now, and no one has ever included any references to these polyamines that you're going to learn about tonight and how critically important they are. So she's going to, and I thought, well, when I first met her, I thought, oh, that's interesting, thinking that I know what I'm talking about, regeneration. Now, you've all heard that the fastest growing cells in the body are the inside lining of the gut. Every few days, we have a new lining to the gut, and that fact is actually not true. The fastest cells are the olfactory epithelium, the lining of the passageways for smell. They are the fastest growing cells in the body, regenerating. But the lining of your gut is the second fastest. Every couple of days, you have a new lining to your gut. And it's completely dependent on these polyamines that Leslie's going to talk about.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tom, for inviting me. And thank you to all of the individuals who've taken time out of their day to be here. First, I will say that I am not a doctor. I am not a scientist. I am a patient. And about 20 years ago, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and lupus. And because I was doing my fifth IVF cycle, that there was no point in doing this round of IVF because it would be pointless. I would be dead in 5 years. And there was no point in bringing a child into the world if I wasn't there to mother it. And fast forward to today, I'm 59 years old. I have reversed my conditions. As a matter of fact, I reversed my conditions within 6 months of diagnosis. And that was using a novel treatment called intravenous immunoglobulin. It's really that encounter with the medical system and with these breakthrough ideas that made me want to help bring other breakthrough ideas to the general public. And that is what I have done with Spermidine. So let's go ahead and get started here. And I hope everyone can see my screen there. Today, I'm going to talk to you about slowing aging inside and out with Spermidine. That's me, Leslie Kenny. I'm the founder and CEO of Oxford Healthspan. I live in Oxford, England, and I work with University of Oxford scientists who did the initial research on Spermidine and the immune system in the rheumatology department here at the University of Oxford. So what is Spermidine? As Dr. Tom so eloquently said, sperma what? It is actually a polyamine. It's an organic compound consisting of 2 or more amino acid groups. That's nothing to be afraid of. Many of us take collagen on the regular. Collagen is made up of amino acids as well. It is present in all human tissues, but also in all animals and plants. So your grandmother makes this, your dog makes it, your children make it. As a matter of fact, when we're young, that is when we have the highest concentrations of spermidine. But it is so crucial to all life that it is, of course, found in its namesake, sperm, because it allows DNA to be more tightly wrapped around spermidine and packaged within the sperm. Normally, it's wrapped around a histone bond, and histone bonds are rather large. So think of it as allowing the sperm to take a little backpack of DNA as opposed to dragging a gigantic suitcase as it tries to make its way to the egg. Spermidine is also present in breast milk, and that is to do exactly what Dr. Tom alluded to. It is that second burnout we're only just beginning to learn more about, and a third of it comes from food intake. It declines as we age. So unfortunately, by the time we're 30, our levels have already begun to decline. But by our 50s, we really begin to feel it. And there are also a few life events that cause us to use up our spermidine stores. So one of these would be pregnancy and breastfeeding, because as I mentioned earlier in the previous slide, spermidine is in very high quantities in human breast. More spermidine will be in that breast milk. So if a woman is obese, strangely, she will have less spermidine for her baby in her breast milk than a woman who is of normal weight. In addition, if we have any kind of an infection, whether that's bacterial or viral, our body will use the spermidine as well to fight off the pathogen. With regard to something like COVID, it would use spermidine to trigger something called virophagy, which is basically a giant trash bag into which you can put viruses. Food sources of spermidine are varying spermidine. Unfortunately, meat does not contain spermidine unless you are looking at chicken and duck liver. Meat itself contains spermine. But if we look at some of these plants that contain spermidine, you'll see that natto at the top, which is a Japanese fermented soy dish, has especially high concentrations. And I don't know if you all know this, but Dr. Tom actually lived in Japan when he was younger, so he knew all about this when I told him about it. And while it is a wonderful source of spermidine on the planet, it is an acquired taste. Here in Britain, it's like Stilton cheese. Not everybody can take Stilton cheese. Natto is a bit like a combination of cottage cheese, lentils, and cobwebs. And it's the cobwebby bit and the smell that many people can't take. Now, I talked about the word sperm previously being a big part of where this comes from, but you know, seeds have a sperm as well, and seeds have something called an endosperm. So all grains, whether that's rice or wheat or barley, they all have an endosperm, and the endosperm has a high color in nature, generally as part
Leslie,
of a polyamine recycling.
May I make a comment here?
Yes.
I think
Yes.
that's a very important concept about the endosperm in seeds, because for seeds to grow, they need a tremendous amount of life force,
Yes.
the nutrition for a seed to grow. That's why sprouts have always been so important as a powerful food, is because the sprout of a plant has so much more concentration of, if I can use the term, growth power.
Yes, yes. And I love life force as well. I just had sprouts for dinner tonight, and I do recommend them to people because of the spermidine content.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Love that. Well, mushrooms also have magic mushrooms, or there are things like cordyceps, which have medicinal property, but mushrooms have high concentrations as well. For those of you listening who want a little additional tip, may I just say that I didn't know this, but as we get older, we acquire a smell that is quite distinct from young people. And interestingly enough, eating mushrooms will allow you to get rid of that odor, that aroma. And so you get a bit of a twofer with mushrooms. Then legumes and beans, green vegetables, and as mentioned earlier, chicken and duck liver. Now, if we look at the diets of the longevity hotspots on the planet, whether that's Sardinia, Ikaria in Greece, Okinawa in Japan, Loma Linda in California, or the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica. So why is spermidine crucial to human health? This picture is actually one that it shows a process that spermidine activates in the human body called autophagy. And autophagy, or autophagy, it's like tomato or tomato. Basically, it's again that garbage bag that I referred to when I said, you know, one of the life events where you use up a lot of spermidine is when you have a virus and you have a kind of trash bag that collects the viruses and bags it up and gets rid of it. Well, virophagy is related, Virophagy is the sequestration or bagging up of a virus and disposing of it. That's really as your magic oven cleaning, automatic oven cleaning button. You know, you can see in this photo here, you see the little orange ball that's at the bottom right corner. That's a lysosome. And a lysosome is basically like the power ball, you know, or the power button on your trash compactor. And so what you're looking at in this picture is basically old dysfunctional parts of the cell, whether those are misfolded proteins or dysfunctional mitochondria or poorly functioning stem cells or other cell components. I won't go into the details. And they're going to be bagged up here. I don't know if my cursor is showing you, but they're going to be bagged up by this here. I won't go into the science here. They're going to fuse with this little red dot, and it's going to burn up. And then at the end, you're going to get this little bit of energy. And that energy is essentially what is created when we fast. So you can activate autophagy by fasting, and it's a way for the body to basically access energy when there is no presence of food. But this is something that if we were looking at an older person who was very slender and who might be suffering from, say, sarcopenia or muscle wasting, we wouldn't want them to necessarily go into a fasted state. And the same thing can happen with women who are hypothyroid, where if they're hypothyroid and they fast, they may find that their metabolism actually downregulates even more. And as a hypothyroid patient, this is something I'm very aware of. So let's take a look at how spermidine stacks up against other so-called geroprotectors. These are molecules that protect us from the diseases of aging, the geriatric diseases of aging, hence why they're called geroprotectors. This is taken from an abstract in Nature by Linda Partridge, Brian Kennedy at National University in Singapore, and Matthias Fuente-Alba. Partridge and Fuente-Alba are here in the UK at University College London. So what they did was they said, gee, we know that there's this theory around how we get older, and that there these hallmarks of aging, which are related to something called the hallmarks of cancer. There are 12 of them altogether. And wouldn't it be interesting if we looked at these geroprotectors and stacked them up against the hallmarks of aging? So this, on the left-hand side, you see the geroprotectors, and on the right-hand side, you can see the hallmarks of aging. Now, at the time that this paper was published, there were 9 hallmarks of aging. Since then, 3 additional, which you can see along the side here, inflammation, dysregulated autophagy, and gut dysbiosis were added. But at the time of this publication, there were just 9. If we look at things like rapamycin, and I don't know how many people here have heard of rapamycin, but it comes from a bacteria found on the island of Rapa Nui in the Easter Islands. Rapamycin inhibits 6 of these. And spermidine also inhibits 6 of these hallmarks. Actually, this chart should have another one here. This chart needs to be updated. I'm sorry. It actually should be for eroded telomeres. There was science out of Germany on that about 2 years ago. And so if we think about this, spermidine and rapamycin appear to be the most promising of all of these geroprotectors. But as I mentioned, since publication of this paper, 3 new hallmarks have been introduced: inflammation, dysregulated autophagy, and gut dysbiosis. And we know that spermidine inhibits all 3. So if we take the 6 plus these 3 new hallmarks, that's 9 out of 12 hallmarks that we know it works for. And If I look at something like cell senescence, which is where you have zombie cells, we know spermidine inhibits cell senescence with immune cells. All right, so now let's go on and take a closer look at some of these hallmarks, because I've just gone very quickly through this, and you might be wondering what they actually mean. So the first hallmark is stem cell dysfunction. And this is where they lose their ability to divide. And unfortunately, we cannot replace cells that have migrated, differentiated, or already died. Therefore, we begin to show the outward symptoms of aging. Some people would say that this includes things such as gray hair. Another hallmark of aging is mitochondrial dysfunction, where the cells, as they age, the mitochondria, which is, if you remember from high school biology, they are the power plants of the cell. They create an energy, like a little battery pack called ATP. Well, they begin to lose their function due to the buildup of oxidative stress. And when mitochondria begin to lose their function, unfortunately, you get increased apoptosis or cell death. And this correlates with aging. Another hallmark of aging is telomere shortening. And what we know from studies done in Germany at the Charité Hospital in Berlin is that cells that have been exposed to, well, you can actually see the telomeres that have been exposed to spermidine actually lengthen. And that's very important. Telomeres are the end caps of our DNA, and they limit the number of times that our cells can actually replicate. And as this slide says, as cells are exposed to environmental factors, they then are subject to changes in their genome. And unfortunately, as these changes accumulate, they are then correlated with decline in cells. Another hallmark of aging that spermidine inhibits is epigenetic alterations. Actually, this slide is telling you more about the previous one, I can see, about the shortened telomeres. But epigenetic changes, I'll just tell you, we all know that the genome accounts for 20% of our overall health outcomes, whereas the epigenome, where our lifestyle, our experience in life turns DNA on or off, good genes on, bad genes off, or vice versa, the epigenome actually accounts for 80% of our health outcomes. And so when we have a negative alteration to the epigenome, we obviously want to be able to fix that, repair that, and that's something spermidine can help with. Another hallmark of aging is altered extracellular communication. Here you can see that, again, as cells age, they show an increase in self-preserving signals. Those signals, they're like distress signals. It's like a distress beacon. Imagine you're in a hotel and you're sleeping, and the red light, there's a red light, flashing red light inside the hotel room that goes off. It would completely disrupt your sleep. And that's a bit like it is with these cells. They're sending off distress signals. And this altered extracellular communication, unfortunately, begins to affect the cells around them as well, which is not good. And they're sending the wrong signals too. Another hallmark of aging spermidine helps with is impaired protein folding. So proteostasis is just the scientific word for protein folding. So we need proteins to make various things in our cell, to live healthier lives, but I like to compare it to your linen cupboard, you know, where you have all the towels and the sheets and things. And if your sheets and your blankets and your towels are not properly folded, you know what a mess it is to try and find anything in that closet, right? So I like to think of misfolded proteins as simply being a really badly organized and maintained linen cupboard. And because spermidine activates this process called autophagy.
Fuck.
Whoever that is, if you could just turn if you could just mute yourself in the lower left-hand button of the screen, that would be great. So as I mentioned, spermidine triggers this process of autophagy, and that allows these misfolded proteins to be properly folded again. And that's really an important concept. Impaired autophagy, I've already gone into. I won't go into it so much, but basically, without clearance of the garbage, your cell function is compromised over time. So think of this as your kitchen, where your teenagers just keep bringing in dirty dishes and nobody is doing the dishes. No one's taking out the garbage, and it becomes a big mess. The kitchen simply does not work as it ought to. Gut dysbiosis, this was something that Dr. Tom touched on at the very beginning. We know that leaky gut and loss of balance, homeostasis, leads to premature aging. We can see that it leads to inflammation, metabolic dysfunction, loss of the production of vital metabolites, whether those are B vitamins, serotonin, or spermidine. But also it's vital so that we don't have these undigested proteins floating out into the bloodstream where the immune system launches in an autoimmune attack. Inflammation is one of the new hallmarks of aging that spermidine will inhibit. We know that chronic inflammation leads to inflammaging, and that these inflamed cells, they are leaky and they spill their toxic contents to other cells, which basically fans the fire and spreads this fire. So those were the hallmarks of aging that spermidine inhibits, and that gives you a quick kind of low-touch science background on those hallmarks. Last sort of big science slide is this one, which is the mechanism of action. So this just tells you about those polyamines that are used to make spermidine. And arginine and ornithine, arginine will become ornithine, and then together with S-adenosyl methionine is going to turn into spermidine. And why I'm going to the trouble of showing you this is that if you are getting spermidine from your diet, if you are not relying on it from your body to make it, then you will allow your body to keep its SAMe for both DNA methylation as well as for good mood, right? It's one of the things that if you are low mood, people say take SAMe. So as we get older and as our tissues stop producing spermidine, our body is still looking for spermidine from our diet or from our gut biome. And if we can get more from our diet, we just lighten the load for our gut biome to make more for us. In addition, we're conserving arginine for nitric oxide production, and that is needed for cardiovascular health, but famously, nitric oxide is very important for something like erectile dysfunction. So let's go into the science around spermidine enhancing health span. I've talked about autophagy, how spermidine levels decline as well, but we know that in these long-lived blue zone populations, they actually maintain high levels of spermidine, and they are able to maintain autophagy even when they are older. What we know is that higher spermidine intake in humans is associated with reduced mortality and increased health span. And it really isn't about longevity anymore, but about health span, the number of years that you are healthy and are able to live independently with your full faculties. So here is a study which shows that spermidine showed the strongest inverse relation with mortality among 146 nutrients studied. That's a lot of nutrients. So if you had to, again, thinking about that table from the publication Nature that looked at all the geroprotectors, and we're trying to stack them up and think, well, we can only take one. Which one do we take? This was sort of similar, but with nutrients. And spermidine came out tops here. In addition, we know that in animal studies, long-term treatment with spermidine increases the health span of middle-aged rats, in particular with neuroinflammation and anxiety, as well as curiosity. And we know that treatment with spermidine alone enhances autophagy in the brain and leads to diminished expression of inflammatory markers in several cortical regions and the hippocampus of the treated rats, suggesting that one beneficial effect of the long-term treatment with spermidine is an attenuated pro-inflammatory state in the aged brain. That is something that we'll get to in a minute, where we're looking specifically at brain health and spermidine. So this is an animal study. For those practitioners who are listening, of course, you know that an animal study is not a human study. So I want to make it very clear to those lay members of the audience today. Animal studies do not equal human studies, but we will get to a human study in a minute. This is a study which shows that polyamine-rich foods, so foods such as foods that have high spermidine, decreases age-associated pathology and mortality, again, in mice, and another similar study. So let's talk about the visible benefits of slowing the physical signs of aging. So some things that that you will notice if you have more spermidine in your diet is that your wounds heal faster. In addition, hair grows in thicker and faster. We know from experiments with hair transplant, basically hair follicles that were taken from not hair transplant patients, but from facelift patients, and those facelift patients tend to be older, that after only 6 days of exposure to spermidine, about 25% of the hair follicles will move back into the growth phase of the hair life cycle. And you could see that they were elongated 20% more than non-treated hair. In addition, it leads to longer eyelashes and fuller brows. It supports collagen and elastin expression. There's some Korean research on this. It improves melanogenesis or pigmentation in hair. And by the way, I'm 59 and I do not dye my hair. And it increases keratin and keratinocytes. Keratin is what our hair is made of, as well as our nails. And keratinocytes are the cells that make the keratin. So when we think about the visible signs of youth that societies value, things like lush hair, long eyelashes, full brows, strong skin, these are all social signifiers of good health. And they also, I personally believe, are signifiers, outward biomarkers of high spermidine content. So here are some studies. I won't go through them, but I leave them here for the benefit of any practitioners in the audience who want to see this. This is on wound healing. This one is on improving melanin or pigment. And by the way, one thing that's interesting about the melanogenesis, so melanin, of course, is not produced just in your hair, it's produced in your skin. And for patients who have vitiligo, where they lose that pigment, it appears that spermidine can help. And this is what this last sentence here is alluding to, that it might be a useful thing. But also we have had clients report that where they have had melasma, that also balances out. And it reminds me of how glutathione, I don't know if any of you know about the master antioxidant, the body's master antioxidant called glutathione, but glutathione is also good for hair color, and it's also good for removing pigmentation that shouldn't be there, say on the face. So they do seem similar that way. Here's another one again on hair follicles. And now we're going to come to this section that I promised we would get to on memory, cognition, and brain health. So I showed you the study on the Sprague Dolly rats that were given spermidine and how their curiosity improved and neuroinflammation declined. And what I want to show you here is how that process of cell renewal and recycling called autophagy helps the brain cells clear out the old and dysfunctional mitochondria and organelles for better health and function. So there was a small study, but it was in humans. 28 individuals between 60 and 90 years old. So this is another thing that makes me feel this is interesting. We're not looking at young people here. These individuals had what we call subjective cognitive decline, and they supplemented with 1 milligram of food-derived spermidine. And after 3 months, they all improved. And we could see that spermidine and spermine together supported positive changes in the hippocampus. That's where your memories are stored and retrieved. And that is one of the problems for Alzheimer's patients, is that they can't retrieve their memories. Here is one of those studies on memory and an older cohort. And now I'd like to move on to the heart. And this is a little bit of a problem. I don't want to sound like a snake oil salesman when I say that spermidine is good for many different parts of the body, but it is because of that process activating cell renewal and recycling, autophagy, that it gets its power. And it's just like in your house, cleaning your house on the regular, whether it's the bedroom, the bathroom, the living room, or the kitchen, it's a good thing. And that is exactly the same with spermidine throughout the body, whether it's your brain, your heart, your liver, your bones, your reproductive organs, it's the same thing. So this slide is really about the benefits to the older heart, and heart cells or cardiomyocytes will preferentially take up spermidine. These cardiomyocytes are responsible for heart rhythm. And one of our scientific advisors, Professor Dennis Noble at the University of Oxford, is the person who actually modeled the first, they did the very first computational model of the rhythm of the human heart, on which many of the pacemaker algorithms are based. He did that in 1964. And he's very excited about this because your cardiomyocytes actually don't replace themselves very frequently. Do you remember how at the beginning of this presentation, Dr. Tom was talking about the lining of the gut and how it replaces itself every 2 to 3 days? Well, you know, your bones replace themselves completely every 7 years. But it's not the case with your heart or your cardiomyocytes. So even at the young age of 25, only 1% of all your cardiomyocytes are going to replace themselves. And by my age, which I'm 59, almost 60, half of 1% of all those cardiomyocytes will replace themselves. So you can see that these are almost like vintage cars. So I was born in 1965, so I like to think of my cardiomyocytes as little vintage Mustangs. And I'm not going to get a new Tesla to replace them. I'm not getting a brand new Porsche. I have my vintage Mustang, and that's the only car I'm ever going to get. And I've got to polish the chrome, fix the suspension, change the oil, and keep that in as good working order as possible for the entirety of my life. And that is something that autophagy can do, but also mitophagy, which is mitochondrial autophagy in the mitochondria. Again, those battery packs of the cells that give us energy. That autophagy and mitophagy that spermidine activates allows these heart cells to renew and recycle, which is very, very important. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, when we have more spermidine in our food from our diet, or we have better production in the gut, or we take it in a supplementary form, food-derived spermidine, we are sparing the body's own kitchen cupboard of arginine. So remember, we need arginine and SAMe to make spermidine. And if we are getting enough of it externally or in the gut biome, then we actually spare our bodies that arginine, which we can use for higher nitric oxide production. So here again, for the practitioners in the room, are some of the citations. I won't go into this too much, but you can see these, and these slides will be made available after the presentation as well, if you'd like to go back and read these studies. And here you can see just 6 weeks of spermidine supplementation restores cardiac polyamine content, preserves myocardial ultrastructure, and inhibits mitochondrial dysfunction. So let's talk about the immune system. I said autophagy is great for all parts of your body, just like cleaning is good for all parts of your house. The immune system is something that many of us didn't think very much about until COVID hit. And now we all know how important this is. Now, it turns out that as we get older, our immune system begins to fail. And the immune system, as a reminder, is very important, not only to properly recognize foreign pathogens that might hurt us and get rid of them, but it's also very important at surveilling, constantly being on the lookout for cancer cells and getting rid of them, and also very important for properly recognizing self-tissue from non-self tissue. When the immune system fails at that, we get an autoimmune attack, or that friendly fire. Spermidine activates, rescues these T memory cells, which improves the response to flu vaccines. But we also know that autophagy rejuvenates elderly human immune cells. And there will be another study coming out in the next, I'd say, 9 months that is in humans, and it has very exciting results, which I can't disclose here, but it's a very interesting paper. And the reason that this is so important is just think about the number of people you have heard of who have gotten pneumonia in their 80s. And everyone says, oh no, that's terrible. If someone gets pneumonia in their 20s, we think, well, that's too bad, but they'll get over it. But we know how fatal it can be once someone is in their 80s, what it is that they've seen. Now, this was the original paper Dan Puliston and Katja Simon did in 2015 that made me want to get involved with spermidine. And what they did was they took 2 groups of mice that were age matched to young humans and to elderly humans. So 2 groups of mice, one that is young, one that is elderly. And what they did was they gave both of them just the regular flu vaccine. Many of us have the flu vaccine, right? Some people do this on the regular here in the UK. GP offices, general practitioner offices are full of elderly people getting their flu vaccines around autumn. And what we know is that actually those flu vaccines don't work well in older people because their memory T cells don't remember what it is that they've seen. So we could see that their antibodies went right up. And then with the elderly people, they just fell back down again, like they'd never been exposed to this. when they gave these mice spermidine together with the flu vaccine, they could see that their antibody levels went way up, but they were sustained. And not only that, they had a better response than the young mice. And that was what was so amazing, was that the response was better than young mice. Why is that? The thought was that it was because these older mice had been around the block a few times. They had seen a lot of pathogens. So they had this huge recipe book of antibodies to deal with every pathogen that came around. And if we could use spermidine to unlock their memory again, they would be able to access those recipes to fight those pathogens. Now let's look at another part of the body, the liver. This is interesting because we are seeing an increasing number of people with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. But in addition, those individuals who have liver damage from fibrosis, from alcohol exposure, that is generally very, very bad. And these two papers are fascinating because they show a reduction in fibrosis in both. So here are those papers. These are animal studies, but they are very exciting. Again, the fact that this molecule, these polyamines, come in food. There's no downside to getting more of these healthy, high polyamine content foods in our diet, and the benefits appear to be pretty big. So with this non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, one thing that's interesting is that you see these mice decrease their body weight, their visceral fat, and they also reduce their triglycerides and total cholesterol. I think the reason that this is happening with the cholesterol, is because spermidine increases tyrosine levels, and tyrosine together with iodine make thyroid hormones. So I think there is a thyroid component here that is helping with improving, also just getting rid of cholesterol, LDL cholesterol as well. Here's another study on liver protection. So very, very exciting to see some protection against liver fibrosis. All right, now to the exciting stuff. This is the stuff that everybody wants to see. They want to know about how it helps with reproductive health. And I must say that this is a very exciting part, especially for women. I mean, I'll start with the men, but we all know that men can have children at much older age, but for women, the oxide, but it also spares nitric oxide too, because you keep your stores of arginine, right? And that can lead to better erectile performance. In addition, we know from a Canadian study done in 2019 in humans that on a dose of 5 milligrams of food-derived spermidine that contained both spermidine and spermine, it normalized DHEA, pregnenolone, testosterone, progesterone, and estradiol. Now, the first two of those, DHEA and pregnenolone, I don't have pregnenolone written down here, but it should be there. Those two were precursor hormones to the other reproductive hormones. In that same study, they noticed that in men under the age of 50, testosterone increased almost 50% on average. And this was only after 30 days. 30 days is not a long time. And we know that in men, in young men, testosterone levels are declining sharply. So this is quite interesting. Is it diet related? Is it environmental? Well, for those young people, it's probably a combination of both, but the fact that spermidine can increase this, spermidine and spermine together, is very exciting. In addition, we could see that the combination of those two polyamines, again, from food-derived spermidine, reduced salivary cortisol levels in both men and women by almost 60%. And finally, in another study, we know that spermidine is correlated with the different stages of sperm production. Spermatogenesis, just a fancy word for sperm production. And here is that study. And Here is the other one, the Lefebvre study on spermatogenesis. And what I will say here is that on spermatogenesis, I would hasten to add that there are a lot of synthetic products out there that are just spermidine. And for the benefits to male reproductive health, you need spermidine and spermine together. All right, so let's get to the female reproductive health. I've made everybody wait. Of course, this stuff for men was exciting, but as I mentioned, for me as a woman and somebody who was confronted with infertility in my late 30s, seeing these studies on restoration of fertility in this case in mice or in petri dishes, this is very, very exciting. So again, I've got the citation of that Canadian study, which showed the normalization of female sex hormones, but we also know that it induces what they call cytoprotective autophagy. Again, cell renewal and recycling in female germline stem cells. This is in vitro. It also decreases cell senescence of female germline stem cells that was induced by hydrogen peroxide. And as you can see, this is the big takeaway. Our findings could be helpful for delaying aging in female germ cells due to oxidative stress and preserving female fertility. This is the holy grail for young women who haven't yet found the right person or do not yet want to start their families. Subsequent to that study, there was another study which talked about how it increases embryogenesis. This was a mouse study in China, how it increased embryogenesis and oogenesis, that is the production of eggs, and it also increased the number of follicles in these mice. And that is very important because how we determine whether a woman is in menopause or not is by counting those follicles. In addition, here's a study that talks about how it improves mood swings. Significant reduction in these mood swings after only 30 days of supplementation. And it also improved the basically incontinence in these women. So women who are going through menopause do face incontinence as well, and this seems to help. And here's the one on the female germline stem cells. Again, these are for the practitioners. So for those of you who are lay members of the public, this is just to show that it's not me saying these things. Here is that study out of China. This was published in Nature, one of the 3 premier scientific journals, how it talked about increasing follicles, increasing egg quality, increasing the number of fertilized embryos. And in the case of these mice, it increased the number of pups, obviously not relevant for us. But this quote is great. Our findings suggest that spermidine supplementation could represent a therapeutic strategy to basically improve egg quality and reproductive outcomes in women looking to conceive at an advanced age. And here is that study. So let's do a quick recap here, the food sources of spermidine. So I showed you at the very beginning of this presentation what those food sources were, and you do want to try to get more of these into your diet. I will also say that fermented foods like natto, like those fermented soybeans, are very good. Obviously, to those practitioners, anybody who has a problem with histamine and cannot deal with fermented foods, then you need to get their spermidine from other plants. And I do want to just talk about the difference between synthetic spermidine and food-derived spermidine, bearing in mind that the very good results in that Canadian study were from food-derived spermidine. Synthetic spermidine, and there are a lot of synthetic spermidines out there. I like to think of it as Tang. I don't know if any of you remember Tang, the orange drink that the astronauts, the American astronauts, took up to the moon with them, but we were all told this is better than orange juice. And I remember my mom thinking Tang was a thing. Now, Tang is not with us anymore, and it is not the same as orange juice. We now know that that there were other components in a real orange that were much better than Tang. And it's kind of the same with when we compare and contrast synthetic spermidine and food-derived spermidine. So synthetic spermidine is what we call a two-dimensional molecular mimic. It is not the same as a three-dimensional plant identical. And for women out there who watch their mothers go on the non-bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, think of it a bit like that. For anybody out there who is on synthetic thyroid as well, I'm on the food-derived thyroid, Armour thyroid, which has all of the co-occurring thyroid hormones. This is another example of why we would want to go for a plant identical. In addition, there have not been any safety or efficacy trials conducted in humans with synthetic spermidine. And we know that at high levels, it becomes a toxin. And that, unfortunately, is going to cause greater aging. We know that in those fertility studies that when the mice were given just a little bit more synthetic spermidine, that all of a sudden it completely impaired not only their egg quality, but it decreased the number of follicles that they had. So it almost pushed them into earlier menopause. Plant-derived molecules come with those cofactors and coenzymes that basically create a synergy and potentiate their efficacy and bioavailability. So that's the presentation. I feel like I've been talking for quite a long time. I want to take some time to take questions from the audience and also discuss practical applications. I also want to give Dr. Tom a chance to jump in here and add some of his thoughts. But I will just quickly mention that if you want to try any food-derived spermidine that we make, and it's called Primidine, which I like to think of, sounds a bit better than spermidine, then you can, and here's the code for Dr. Tom, but if you're a practitioner, you can get it from the Get Healthy store. So again, this presentation will be available later. So let's go back to Q&A and practical applications. I'll stop my share.
Well, Leslie, thank you so much. It's clear that you have put your heart and soul into this, this area. And the first question I have for you is, when you were told you likely had 5 years left of life, so there's no need to get pregnant, what were you doing? What was your work at that time?
I had an online matchmaking company, and I was based in Hong Kong, so I was I was either number 1 or number 2 into China at that time with online matchmaking. And yes, in order to get into China, I had sidebar content on good relationships and sex as well, because I had to get the approval of the Chinese government. Yes. And they said, well, if you want to do this, then you have to get information out to tell people how not to have babies. And I said, well, that I can do that, but that will be really boring. So I'll work with you, Family Planning Association of China, but only if you let us put out information on not just safe sex, but good sex. And that's how I then got the moniker from an Italian daily Corriere della Sera, which is one of the largest daily newspapers in Italy, that I was the high priestess of sex in China. So it's not surprising that I then, 20 years later, I'm dealing with this crazy molecule called spermidine, because probably nobody else wanted to use that word. And I just didn't care. It had no shock value for me.
Yes, I get no shock value.
Yeah.
I asked the question because your angels were watching over you and you found a path to save your life.
Yeah, I did.
And from there, it's obvious that you've committed yourself to carrying a message out of how people can enjoy their lives more, be healthier, and as you described, extend their healthy lifespan versus their total lifespan.
Yeah.
Maybe there's things we're going to do that are going to increase our total lifespan. We'll live a little longer, maybe. But in my world, and probably because of my age, I'm 72.
Don't look it.
In my world, what's most important is healthy lifespan. And I think for most of our attendees, if they think about that concept, that's really important for them also, is not necessarily living longer, but having good quality of life for whatever number of years you've got.
Yeah, 100%. I took a year out of my undergraduate degree at UC Berkeley to go back to the Midwest to take care of my grandmother in Indianapolis. So she had a brain tumor, was inoperable. I fed her through a feeding tube for a year. I poured chocolate and strawberry Ensure through a tube. I read to her. I changed her catheter. I mean, it was terrible for her, I'm sure. But she lived an extra year, and she died not of the cancer, not of glioblastoma, but she died of a bleed on the stomach, which can happen from a side effect from the cancer medication she was taking. So it's just, I know I don't want to go like that.
Yes, my point. That's exactly my point. And for everyone here, you see the passion and the knowledge that this woman has. And it blew me away, literally. There are not many things that surprise me in healthcare. There are not many. But this thing about what?
I know. It is embarrassing. That's why I had to rename it Primidine, because I knew my mother would never be able to say it.
Yeah. And everything that she has presented to us in this last 40 minutes or so about, can you imagine a study that looked at 146 different nutrients, and the one that was the top of them all was spermidine? Well, that says it all. In terms of how important is this. So I just want to encourage everyone, and don't order a bottle. Do not do that. Well, I'll try a bottle. Don't do that. If you're going to try it for at least 2 months. Give it 2 months to see, do I notice anything? And not that it's going to jack you up where like 3 cups of coffee will, or 2 espressos. It's not going to do that. But if you notice there's a base, it seems like your nail cutters are getting dulled because it's harder to cut your nails. That's because your nails are getting harder. They're getting stronger, or your hair looks different, or people are commenting and complimenting you on how you look, and you think you look the same, but all of a sudden you're getting compliments from your friends who haven't seen you in a few weeks. That's the kind of stuff you look for, but you have to give it enough time. You don't do a couple of weeks or 1 bottle for a month, and order at least 2 bottles. You get a 15% discount. If you're going to try it for a couple of months. Now for Marzi and I, we're on it every day. Marzi is soon to, I don't know if she would want me to say this, but she's soon to be 45. And she wants another baby. And so we're working on that now. And so when I told her about this, where is it, right? And she's taking it every day, as am I. So we believe in it. And I've read the studies. As I said, I've read about 12 studies so far, and there's a few more here I saw tonight that I'm going to also review. So I just want to encourage people, before we get into the other Q&As, my opinion that this is a top of the line, one of those base things that you just include, not looking for a quick result from, but knowing that in the long term is going to bring you some of the benefits that you want and that you're looking for.
I would agree with that. I'll just show one photo. This is a woman who is 80. I don't know if you can see that. And her hair color returned. As you can see, the hair is at the color, the new colors come in at the base, and the tips are white.
Lift the photo up a little higher.
Yeah, there. Yeah, and she wrote to tell us this, but she was not happy. She didn't want her hair to be her original hair color again, because she said all her friends, she's British, she thought all her friends would think she was vain and was dyeing her hair, which I thought was very funny. I thought if she'd been back in California, she would have been thrilled, right? Now, in her case, it was 6 months. I always say, remember that the good stuff is happening on the inside. Your body, in its innate wisdom, will allocate it where it most needs to go. It triages and it says, I give it to my heart cells first. I give it to the neurons first. I give it to the liver first. If that is the case, if you need to be topped up there, if your kitchen cupboard stores are bare, and it goes there, it's not going to go to your hair to grow your hair faster or to increase pigment. So that is something I hasten to add.
Well, that's a very convincing photo of what it's doing inside.
We have more of those.
Yes, that the new growth, the cell turnover is younger, healthier cells.
Exactly.
Fabulous. Now, do we have a Q&A, a box?
There should be a place a chat box where people should be able to, yes, there is a chat box, and people can,
the chat box.
Yes, people can put in questions there.
Okay, so if anyone has questions, you're welcome to type them in there. In the meantime, we're just going to continue talking about this. And when you talk about food grade spermidine,
yes,
I know that in our conversations, you were very proud to tell me how you sourced where this comes from. Can you tell us a little about that?
Sure. So we get all of our raw materials from Japan, and we have two food-derived spermidine products. One is made from wheat germ, and that wheat germ is European wheat and Japanese wheat. It is not with American wheat, because American wheat does not get allowed into Japan because it's covered in glyphosate. And so we get it processed there as well. And that particular product also has a fructooligosaccharide. So it will say maltodextrin. It is technically a maltodextrin, but it is over 70% fiber. Therefore, it becomes a resistant starch. And it's completely food derived. So that has spermidine, spermine, and putrescine, and they're all part of a polyamine recycling loop, and they can turn into each other. The other product we source entirely on the longevity island of Okinawa. So Okinawa are the southernmost islands of Japan, and we actually specially commission a substrain of chlorella that has the highest concentration of spermidine in it, just for us. So we have it commissioned there. It's grown there under the sun. It's a very remote island. It is one of the most remote of the Okinawan islands. And I have videos of it. And then we have paired it with two other cell renewal activators, or autophagy activators. This is nobilitin from Okinawan lime peel, and also from curcumin from Okinawan autumn turmeric. So that particular product, to answer Debbie's question, that Primadine that I've just described, Primadine GF, is gluten-free.
Yes, Debbie, this is the Primadine, and you see on a GF in big green letters, or that green circle. If you can see that, it's Primadine, gluten-free. And this is what Marzi and I take. So If you have a wheat sensitivity, or if you're concerned about wheat, this product, I fully endorse the Primidine GF product.
Okay, great. And that also answers Flo's question, who says she has an allergy to wheat. So Primidine GF would be the right thing to do. So we'll go with the first question from Debbie. Does this help with Hashimoto's? Now, Hashimoto's as an autoimmune condition, I'll just tell you my philosophy as an autoimmune patient, but it's really, this is Dr. Tom's area. My philosophy was with my Hashimoto's was they wanted me to suppress the immune system. And what I wanted to do was to reset the immune system and bring it back to balance, to homeostasis. And that's why I did the intravenous immunoglobulin. I then removed all of the triggers of my immune system that were causing it to have an inappropriate response. So those would be things like dairy and gluten. There were some other, gluten, of course, is the most famous lectin. There were some other lectins that were triggers for me, like tomatoes. Does this help with Hashimoto's? Well, it's an anti-inflammatory, but Hashimoto's is a serious disease, and I would prefer Dr. Tom take that question.
Yeah, well, for Debbie, for any autoimmune disease, the key is where is the trigger coming from activating your immune system, which is the immune system in this case is attacking the thyroid. If you haven't had a chance yet, I'd suggest you pick up my book, The Autoimmune Fix. Won the National Book Award. It's in 14 languages now. That it explains in detail the mechanisms behind where autoimmune conditions come from. And when you understand where they come from, you start asking different questions as to how do I get better? You start asking the questions, well, how am I throwing gasoline on the fire? Where is this inflammation coming from that's manifesting in my thyroid? And then you start learning about the foods that you're eating. In Leslie's case, she talked about wheat and other lectins like tomatoes, and she reversed her 3 autoimmune diseases by discontinuing throwing gasoline on the fire. Leslie, am I saying that, summarizing that in an okay way?
Completely correct, yes.
Yeah, that's the key for every autoimmune disease. And when you look at the Autoimmune Fix, when you read that book, you will understand that principle. From that perspective, as you're doing the big picture of reducing and eliminating the triggers of inflammation, taking this product will accelerate building healthier, younger, stronger cells. But taking this product and living the lifestyle that's caused the problem you currently have is not going to work. It may help you feel better a little bit, but if you have an autoimmune disease, it's critical to identify why is my immune system activated, attacking my own tissue. That's the critical component.
Okay, great. So now let's go to Paul Whelan's question, which is which foods deplete spermidine? Alcohol, because it's causing liver fibrosis, sugars, which would lead to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, anything where spermidine is then going to have to jump in to repair something. In that case, that's fibrosis of the liver. Those would be examples. But I think the biggest problem is actually with the gut biome. And, you should get 1/3 of your intake from gut biome production if you have healthy bacteria in the gut. And if we are exposed to broad spectrum antibiotics, guess what? Those bacteria get wiped out. And then you have effectively burned down your factory of spermidine. So you need to rebuild it if you can. And I suppose that taking things like fermented foods, which will give you lots of probiotic colonies, or selectively taking different colonies in supplementary form, that could also help too.
beginning earlier this year, I started seeing patients on Zoom. And I see maybe one a week, something like that. And they've got to do a number of tests before I'll see them. And I want to see their last 5 years of health records. And I review those and recommend a few tests. And then when the test results come back, we sit and talk. And consistently, what we find, there's a few tests that are really important. One is, are you sensitive to wheat? Is your immune system fighting wheat? Because it's so very common. The second is, do you have intestinal permeability, the leaky gut? Critically important. And these products that we're talking about help to heal the leaky gut once you stop throwing gasoline on the fire. And consistently, the microbiome of the gut, the good guy, bad guy ratio in the gut is way out of balance. Too many bad guys, not enough good guys. And so it's an important concept in your protocols that you put together to heal and regenerate as a healthier, younger you. Really important that you put attention on rebuilding a healthy gut microbiome. And as Leslie said, eating fermented foods is important. A tablespoon a day, and you're inoculating your gut, you increase the inoculation of the good bacteria in your gut 10,000-fold when you have a tablespoon a day of fermented vegetables. So we tell all of our patients, get 5 different types of fermented vegetables: sauerkraut, kimchi, miso, fermented beets, curry flavor, doesn't matter. And every day you just have a different one, because every family of fermented vegetables feeds different good bacteria in your gut. They don't feed the bad bacteria. White rice, white flour, the white sugar, they feed the bad bacteria. The whites, the pasty foods feed the bad bacteria. The fermented vegetables feed the good bacteria. So you want to increase the good bacteria in your gut. There's a lot more to it than that. And that's all in the book. You'll find it all in the book.
I will also mention that when babies are breastfeeding, breast milk, I mentioned, has high concentrations of spermidine and spermine in it, but it also has high concentrations of fructooligosaccharides. And that's why when we developed Primidine Original, which is actually wheat-derived, so not appropriate for celiacs, but that particular product, I wanted it to be as close to the composition of breast milk as I could. So you get those fructooligosaccharides to help feed the good bacteria in the gut biome that are capable of manufacturing more spermidine for you.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take a look at this question from David, who says, going back to your chart on the hallmarks of aging, is there any additional benefit to adding other agents to spermidine, such as rapamycin or metformin? I'll say what my opinion is, and then you can share yours if you want, Dr. Tom. So spermidine inhibits 9 out of the 12. The remaining hallmarks are around nutrient sensing, DNA repair, and around cell senescence. Now, we have evidence, we know that it will inhibit cell senescence in immune cells. We do not know that for other parts of the body. That's why we cannot categorically say that it helps with cell senescence. And that is an important difference with rapamycin, because rapamycin does help with cell senescence. For those who don't know, when you have senescent cells, there are zombie cells. It's kind of like when you go to a wedding and somebody's old uncle gets very drunk and is in the corner and is saying inappropriate things. And you just say, let's just lead him over there. He won't hurt anybody. And he keeps causing problem. That is a zombie cell. That is a senescent cell. You don't want these senescent cells around. You want to either renew them or get rid of them by killing them off. And like I said, we don't know, but I I really shouldn't say this. I'm not a scientist. The evidence on immune cells is great. Now, would you want to take rapamycin? I don't like rapamycin as a former autoimmune patient. So it is an immune suppressant. It's given, as Dr. Tom would be easily able to tell you, it's given to organ transplant patients so that they do not reject their organ, the organs that have been donated to them. And if the other thing is that the dose has got to be just right. There is such a thing as a Goldilocks dosing. And each of us is bio-individual. The dose that, that for this drug, it's got to be just right for you. Not too little, not too much, because if it's too much, guess what? You're going to have open mouth sores. And it doesn't help with wound healing in that respect. And that's what bothers me about rapamycin. As exciting as it looks in animal models. Metformin, I think, works for people who have diabetes. I've never taken metformin, and I know people who've taken metformin who have not had diabetes, and they have told me that they have lost muscle. And that is a reason why I don't personally like it. Now, for the doctor's view on this, Dr. Tom, you give your answer to this question.
Well, your answers are really excellent. For me, both rapamycin and metformin do have a number of listed side effects that affect the cardiovascular system, the digestive system, breathing capabilities, energy levels. They're fairly common side effects, and they're not life-threatening in general, but they're there. And I never mixed metformin or rapamycin with spermidine. I actually don't recommend rapamycin or metformin because of those potential side effects. And what we found is, as we educate our patients identifying the triggers of inflammation and their immune system calms down, and that low grade, the Center for Disease Control tells us that 14 of the 15 top causes of death in the world are chronic inflammatory diseases. It's always inflammation. And so if you can identify the primary triggers of inflammation and reduce those or eliminate them, we find the results we get are more than satisfying. They're celebratory most of the time. And so I don't have an experience with mixing rapamycin or metformin with spermidine and primidine, so I can't speak directly to it. But I would be hesitant to try.
I will just say one other thing. There was a study that was done in Denmark a few years ago, and I'm just looking for the citation here. It's Lewis, Louis, 2022. Paternal preconception, diabetes drugs, and birth defects in offspring. So this study was done, it's a longitudinal study done in Denmark, thousands of males who were of reproductive age who were taking metformin, and it did not affect them. But what it did was it led to an increase in penile defects, a 40% increase in genital birth defects in male offspring. And when I saw that study, I thought, well, it didn't hurt them, but look what it did to their offspring. And if you mess with the reproductive system of any species, I just feel that can't be a good thing, right? Yeah. So that's my caution on metformin. So you can look up that study. There was another one, WenSink, also 2022, that you can look up, WenSink. So here's another question. How is your product dosed? Can it be taken with food and other supplements? Yes, this is a food product. So think of it that way. If you have a contraindication, if your doctor says, don't take something with vitamin K. Now, our Primidine GF has some naturally occurring vitamin D and vitamin K. K stands for coagulation in Danish. And if you are on an anticoagulant, then that would be contraindicated for you. But think of it as a food, right? And you can take it with food. I find that with Primidine GF, because it has some B vitamins, some people cannot take B vitamins on an empty stomach. They get nauseous. And so if you are one of those people, always take it with food. We have it in powdered form, so you can just add it to your smoothies. Some people don't like taking tablets or capsules. So Primidine Original is available as a powder. We're hoping to get Primidine GF as a powder too. And you can easily add it that way. In terms of the dose, it's 1 milligram, which is the minimum effective dose, shown to improve cognition and memory in those with subjective cognitive defects.
I have a question about the Primidine GF. Does it include spermine also?
It does not include spermine. I could not find a non-allergenic version of spermidine that had the minimum effective dose. You know, you have to get it into this tiny capsule, so you need 1 milligram, and that also had spermine. So of all the grains, barley or rice, wheat has the highest concentration of spermidine. There are some barley products there. They say they are, how do they call it? Sprouted barley with spermidine. They have very, very high doses. Why? Because they are taking the barley seeds, they're putting them in a tub of water, and a big vat of water, and then they're throwing in synthetic spermidine. And so when those seeds sprout, they suck up all the synthetic spermidine, and then you dry them, and then you, of course, have got high spermidine content, quote unquote, naturally. Now, why do I know that? Because these people have come to me to sell me this product. And I have said, I know from the science that barley, and they've even done it with a Latin American grain, the name escapes me right now. And I said, those don't have that high a concentration of spermidine. How did you do this? And they said, oh, well, we sprout it. We just pour in lots of synthetic. And I thought, well, that's cheating. That's like turning a white carnation blue. You remember in elementary school, you like take the white carnation and blue food dye. It's like, that's a cheat, right?
Yes.
And so this was my conundrum, was I could not find the two polyamines together in a non-allergenic plant form, unfortunately. If you've got the enzyme to convert spermidine to spermine, so it starts as putrescine, turns to spermidine, and that can then convert on to spermine, then you could make the spermine yourself.
That's the goal. That's the goal.
Yeah. Okay. Now we have another question from Paul Whelan. Does autophagy get rid of zombie cells? So I touched on this earlier. We have evidence. Oh, well, so yes, does autophagy get rid of zombie cells? So what do we know about that?
Well, that's one of the goals of the Walter Longo.
Yes.
Who is the man who has done so much on fasting, mimicking diets, and time-restricted eating. He has shown that fasting and fasting mimicking diets increase autophagy and reduce zombie cells.
Okay.
So in that aspect, we know that autophagy will do that.
So that I think that's the issue, is that, you know, do we have direct evidence, right? It's a bit indirect. So we know also spermidine is a fasting mimetic. So it does what fasting can do. We know it works with immune cells, and those are senescent immune cells. So yes, it would be the autophagy that's doing it, but I don't have the evidence that it directly does that with the other cells. So from a scientific point of view, I can't claim that, but yes, in an indirect way, as Dr. Thomas said, yes, you could say that. And then we've got a question for, yes, perfect, well done, good. All right, are there any other questions?
While anyone with the last question is typing it in, I just want to acknowledge once again for everyone here that your watching you're experiencing, how would I say this? A pure heart whose life was saved and has produced the highest quality product she could possibly do to help all of us enhance our healthy lifespan. That's the goal here. And this is one of those products, once again, that I feel is essential and powerful at extending healthy lifespan. Reduce the triggers of inflammation. And I'm going to throw a plug in here. If you haven't seen the inflammationequation.com, where I interviewed Leslie and she was kind enough to be one of our sponsors. If you haven't seen the inflammationequation.com, just go to the inflammationequation.com and register. It's free. And you learn from world authorities on how inflammation is the mechanism in the development of every chronic disease, every one of them. And so when you learn that, here is where a tool like this comes in hand to reduce inflammation, increase autophagy, clean up the old and damaged cells, make room for new cells, bring your hair color back. You know, this is going to be interesting. We'll see, Leslie. We'll see what happens with this one.
I'm looking forward to that.
Me too.
Maybe Marcy too. Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. Oh, thank you. That's really kind of you to say. But this is, you know, I don't do this. I don't do this for, you know, because I'm creating a startup and I'm flipping this. This is really a passion project for me. And it really, really is very gratifying when people tell me what, you know, what benefits they have found from this.
Yes.
Okay. And then Gordon is asking about the website. There are two. So if you're a practitioner, you can get it from gethealthy.store. And if you're an individual, you can go to Healthspan.com. That's one. And Dr. Tom has a discount code, which I think is the Dr. 15.
Right. The DR 15.
The DR 15.
Don't spell the word doctor out. It's the DR 15. And on your first order, you can get a 15% discount.
And for practitioners, I'll just write this out. It is gethealthy.store.
Yes.
So there you go.
Well, Leslie, thank you so much for your presentation and your time and your passion. You're
likewise
changing the world. You're changing the world. And so
thank you. Just like you inspire me. So thank you very much. And to everyone who stayed on all this time, thank you very much, because you're also part of the change. You know, be curious, get curious, take responsibility for your health. Everybody should be empowered to do that.
Yes. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you again next time.
See you later, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.